Good evening, everyone. My name is Karis, and tonight I want to start by telling you all a little story. A story that, quite frankly, has sent me into a downward spiral for weeks. It's led me to question things I previously wouldn't give a second thought to, and it's even led me into analyzing the psychology of human behavior. Now, tonight, I'm very excited to share what I've learned with all of you, but before I get ahead of myself, I think that I should start at the very beginning. Not too long ago, my parents took my brother and I on vacation to Vietnam and Cambodia. For weeks leading up to this trip, I complained. Not in an ungrateful way necessarily, just in the very honest, somewhat entitled way of thinking, why couldn't we have gone somewhere cool? Why couldn't we have gone skiing in Japan or Switzerland? Why did we have to go to Vietnam? Now, pretty quickly after I had this thought, I had a realization. Going to Vietnam is actually kind of niche. And although I didn't necessarily want to be there, I knew that I would get really good stories for my Instagram. I'd like to think I'm at least a little bit self-aware, so pretty quickly after I had that deeply shallow thought, I told myself, Karis, that is not a good reason to be excited. Nevertheless, it was my reason. I didn't care that I was going to a new country, experiencing new things, meeting new people, even seeing new cultures. All I cared was about how it looked and for how I would be perceived by other people on social media. That realization was pretty uncomfortable to me because it led me to question, when did this shift happen? When did living life become less important than being seen living it? And the more I started thinking about it, I started noticing it all around me. It took about 5 minutes of scrolling on social media to confirm a theory that we all already know. We document our lives as we live them. We turn moments into content before we've even had a chance to fully experience them. In fact, tonight I would like to share with you that the real truth behind closed doors is that we are living in what I call the performative epidemic. The performative epidemic, a culture where our behaviors, our actions, even our whole identities are not shaped around who we are as individuals, but rather by how we will be perceived by other people. So let's take a step back. What does it really mean to be performative? Because truthfully, it is about so much more than merely posting on social media. It's about shaping your identity, what you wear, what you like, what you say, what your interests are, not because it reflects on who you are as a person, but because of what it reflects and because of what you want other people to know about you. And once you begin to see this issue, trust me, you will see it everywhere. It's in the person who is sitting in your favorite coffee shop for hours with their laptops open, where productivity starts to look more like an aesthetic than something real. At some point, you almost have to wonder, is this person really working, or are they performing what working looks like? It's the rise of identities like the clean girl aesthetic, an effortless, put-together lifestyle comprising of drinking matcha every day and going to Pilates. And I say this as someone who genuinely loves matcha to the point where I dragged my entire family to Japan to see the origins of my favorite drink. And even I've begun asking myself, do I really like matcha because I like the taste of it? Or do I like it because I like what it represents? Because at this point, matcha has become so much more than a drink. It's become an ambassador of a lifestyle, one of health and wellness and well-being. And when something as simple as a drink manages to be associated with an identity, then preference is no longer just preference. It becomes linked to identity. It loses its ability to be a preference. When our actions, when our behaviors, they are not autonomous choices anymore. When we choose to instead make them statements to the world, that is when we are no longer living our lives, but we are, in fact, performing them. One of the clearest ways this performance shows up is in the way we share our everyday lives. And I say this with full self-awareness. I am not particularly proud of the extent to which I have shared my entire learning to drive process on my close friend's Instagram story. From dramatic updates of studying for my learner's permit, to celebrating the first time I drove a car, to even documenting my very first, very unfortunate, crash. Now, none of this, absolutely none of this, was anyone else's problem but my own, and yet I broadcasted it anyway. Because somewhere along the line, oversharing did not just become normal, it became what was socially acceptable. And sharing as a whole, sharing is not a bad concept. Sharing is what brings people together. It helps people feel more connected. But the problem comes in when there is a shift in questioning, when you're no longer asking yourself, well, how do I feel about the situation? And instead, the question becomes, how can I best present what I'm feeling to other people? In my case, I had to ask myself, is being a bad driver just something that I went through, or is it something that quietly became part of my identity because it's something that I've been repeatedly performing? Now, the reason we do this, it's not random. In fact, it's neurological. Every time we share something, whether it be online or in person, we receive a reaction. And from that reaction, our brain releases dopamine, and the dopamine, in turn, reinforces our behaviors. Over time, this conditions us. We begin to make associations between certain content, certain stories, and certain behaviors with positive reinforcement. And once that association is formed, well, we can't help but begin to unconsciously optimize our behavior. Not because we are trying to be fake, but because we are humans with brains wired to seek positive reinforcement. You see, when validation becomes measurable, authenticity becomes optional. The really scary news is that when performance is performed often enough, it stops feeling like performance. And that's when it becomes something deeper. There's a psychological term known as pathological lying. It recalls consistent patterns and behaviors of lying, often without a clear reason or benefit. In fact, it's also very much compulsive. Now, it's one thing to be aware that you're being performative. You're consciously deciding to adjust your personality and your identity to receive validation from those around you. But it is a completely different story when you yourself start to believe the identity that you have created for other people. Because once that line blurs, the line between what is real and what is true, and what is being performed, once that line can no longer be seen, then deciding to be performative is no longer a decision at all. It becomes a default. And scarily, when lying to other people becomes easy, it can easily become even easier for lying to become compulsive. Especially when lies surrounding identity, they don't feel inherently bad. So what is my point? My point is that ultimately, this is the risk of a society that is built on performance. We risk living in a society where truth erodes, trust becomes optional, and people begin to lose their sense of identity. So let's end on a happier note, because that was all fairly depressing. I want to conclude by asking you all a very simple question. Would you still run a marathon if you knew that you could tell absolutely nobody that you did? Think about that for a second. Because the answers to those kinds of questions say more about us than we could even imagine. And I recognize the irony of this. I just spent the last 8 or so minutes on a stage oversharing my thoughts, my habits, my driving history to a room full of people I don't really know, which, if anything, proves how deeply embedded this problem really is. But I think that awareness is where it starts. I think that it starts in the small moments, choosing to experience something without feeling the need to share it, choosing to feel something without having the urge to present it, and feeling the need to do something good without needing to tell other people about it. Because in a world where performance is absolutely everywhere, possibly the most powerful thing we can do is simply be real. Thank you.